Shall we start with our
Ready na po, Doc.
introduction? Sige. And then I'll call on our president to say a welcome.
Doc Gladys.
Mhm.
Doc, I'll play the videos na lang po muna. Okay lang po. I'll play the paasa videos po muna.
Yes, please. Can you please play the videos first?
Okay po.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay, well, that was a video of PAASE, but I would also like to say that the University of the Philippines Medical Alumni Society, and there it is, there's the logo, is also a sponsor of this program. Before I call on the president of PAASE to say a few words of welcome this very cold January in the state of Maryland, I would like to recognize the presence of some of the stalwarts of UPMASA who are present here today. Number one, Dr. Lou Publico, past president. Dr. Cecil Bregman, incoming president. And of course, I see Dr. Ray Pagtakhan. That name is famous, Canadian, a minister of the government of Maryland. So, Madam President, there is from PAASE, not only do I see the name, I see the name of Dr. Al Serrafica, who is the chair of the Board of Governors of PAASE, and they lead the scientific effort in the Philippines. So before I say a few words of introduction to our guest speaker, may I have Dr. Gladys Completo welcome the participants for this evening. Ma'am, your
Thank you.
floor.
Thank you very much, Billy. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Billy Cabillon for really leading this, for making this happen. For this month, our theme is good health and well-being. So on behalf of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, I'm Dr. Gladys Completo. I'm a professor at UP Los Baños. At the same time, I'm also the president of PAASE. It is with great honor to welcome you all to today's webinar entitled Good Health and Well-Being Insights and Challenges in the Philippine Context. And this event provides us with an opportunity to reflect on one of the most critical Sustainable Development Goals, which is SDG 3, good health and well-being. And it focuses on ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. So this webinar is a good reminder for all of us of the significant challenges our country is facing in achieving this goal. From ensuring equitable access to healthcare services to tackling the social determinants of health, the path toward achieving good health and well-being for every Filipino is both complex and demanding. So we are very privileged to have with us a distinguished guest who will guide us through this discussion, Dr. Fernando B. Garcia Jr., Professor and Dean of the Department of Health Policy and Administration at the College of Public Health, University of the Philippines, Manila. Dr. Garcia will not only present key insights and challenges, but will also emphasize the essential role that higher education institutions, not just the University of the Philippines, play in achieving SDG 3. As hubs of knowledge, innovation, and leadership, these institutions are uniquely positioned to influence policies, engage in research, and champion health and well-being for all. So once again, I welcome all of you and for taking time to join us today. And I will now give the floor to Dr. Billy Caballon to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President. Fernando B. Garcia Jr. is a professor of health policy and administration, Dean of the College of Public Health, University of the Philippines, Manila, Center Director of the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, Tropical Medicine and Public Health, CMEO or TropMed, as it would say. Dean Fernando Garcia received his Bachelor of Science degree, major in economics, and Master of Public Administration, both from the rarefied air of Diliman. He was conferred with a PhD in public health, major in health economics, specialized in health economics, I would say, at the School of Public Health and Social Work, Queensland University of Technology, Brisbane, Australia. He has completed his Doctor of Public Administration program in Diliman. With his diverse background, combining academic degrees, professional training and experiences, his research interests in general and health economics, health systems strengthening, public health, health equity, health policy, and public management, I present Dean Fernando Garcia Jr. Sir, the floor is yours.
Salamat po, Sir Billy. Maraming salamat po. Let me just share with you my slide deck. Actually, today is the last day of our enrollment now here in the University of the Philippines, Manila. Share ko lang pa. Sir, can you see my screen? And can you hear me pa?
Yes po.
Okay, so of course, bago po ang lahat, maraming pasasalamat po sa PAASE, Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, the Board of Directors, the officers, as well as the members. Good morning from UP Manila, College of Public Health. And of course, I would like to, I would like to be the one to first congratulate you on your upcoming 45th anniversary. I believe when I reviewed the website of PAASE, you were founded back in April 23, 1980. So 45th anniversary. Of course, special thanks to Dr. Billy Cabillon, no, who invited me, I think last year, Sir Billy, when I received your email. Salamat po sa pag-imbita po sa amin. So today, I'll be discussing to you this topic on good health and well-being. As mentioned by our president a while ago, this is actually part of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, SDG. So for my presentation, I'll be providing you, I think my presentation will last for maybe 30 to 40 minutes. Then after that, it's a free discussion. No? I'll be willing to and happy to answer some of your questions and comments. So for my presentation outline, I have 5. I would like to do a quick review of the Sustainable Development Goals with focus this time on the SDG number 3. SDG number 3 is on good health and well-being. Then the second part, I'll be doing some identification. What are some of the ways really on how higher education institutions like the University of the Philippines can actually facilitate or support the attainment of the SDGs. Then I'll be discussing to you also or highlighting the socioeconomic determinants of health. Socioeconomic determinants of health, as we know, is actually a critical consideration when we want to address the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG number 3. Then towards the end, I would like to discuss with you, to present with you a case study. The case study is actually about a third-class municipality in the Philippines that despite the challenges and the limitations that this municipality actually encounters, they were able to actually make significant improvements in achieving their SDG number 3, the good health and well-being. And towards the end, I'll be giving a brief take-home messages. No? Yeah, that's the outline of my presentation. So let me start my presentation by briefly reviewing the SDGs. No? So the question would be, what are SDGs? Sustainable Development Goals. And why are they important? Right? So the Sustainable Development Goals are actually universal. These are shared objectives of all the United Nations member states to actually transform the world, the society, into a more equitable, prosperous, and peaceful world. And the target is 5 years from now. That's 2030. No? So this SDG actually replaces what we call the Millennium Development Goals. I know you're familiar also with that one. The Millennium Goals actually has only what? Eight targets. But now with the SDG, we have 17 targets. So SDGs are actually product of conversations that serves as the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everyone. So I'll be focusing my presentation, my talk on good health and well-being. So SDGs are also known as global goals. No? They were actually adopted, as I mentioned a while ago, by the United Nations back in 2015. 2015, dun po natapos yung Millennium Goals natin. No? Then after that, onwards, nagkaroon po tayo, we have the SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals, which is actually a universal call to action, as I've mentioned, towards that preferred reality or target. What's that preferred reality or target? End poverty, protect the planet, ensure that all people will enjoy peace and prosperity 5 years from now, 2030. So there are 17 SDGs. If you look at the 17 SDGs, these are actually interconnected. They are actually integrated, meaning they recognize that actions in one of the and any of the SDG would affect the outcome of the other SDG goal. No? And that the development must actually balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. So everyone is a stakeholder. You, the PAASE, us in the academe are actually stakeholders, and we can actually contribute. And the good thing is that our contributions towards the attainment of these goals, whether that's big or whether that's small, will actually make an impact on the world and make better opportunities for individuals and our communities. So as I mentioned, I will focus my discussion on SDG number 3. So these are the targets. So each of the development goals, like SDG number 3, it has actually what we call the targets. No? Under SDG number 3, there are 17 targets, and each of the target, each of this target 3 to 13, actually has a set of indicators. No? For example, target number 1. Target number 1 talks about reducing maternal mortality by 2030 to less than 70 per 100,000 live birth. So the possible indicators, the indicators that were mentioned Under target 3.1 is maternal mortality ratio, proportion of birth attendant by skilled birth personnel. Skilled health personnel. Under 3.2, by 2030, the target is that we should end preventable deaths of newborn and children under 5 years old. 3.3, fighting communicable diseases. So by 2030, we should end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and neglected tropical diseases. Under target 3.4, 3.4 states about reducing 1/3 premature mortality from non-communicable diseases and promote mental health. Target 3.5 talks about strengthening the prevention and treatment of substantial abuse by 2030. 3.6 talks about having the number of global deaths and injuries from road accidents. 3.7, ensuring the universal access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services. 3.8 talks about the access or achievement of the universal health coverage. Target 3.9 talks about substantially reducing the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemical and air, water, and soil pollution and contamination. Target 3.8, strengthen the implementation of the World Health Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in all countries. Target 3.B talks about the support of the research and development of vaccines and medicines. Target 3.C, increasing health financing and supporting health workforce in developing countries. And the last one is about improving or strengthening the capacity of all countries, especially in developing countries like the Philippines. So these are if you count them all, these are actually 13 targets under the SDG number 3. Now let's look at what is now the situation in the Philippines. How far are we from the target? So we actually have this is the data coming from the Philippine Statistics Authority. There is actually what we call the SDG Watch. SDG Watch is actually one of the agencies or the organization that is actually compiling Philippine Statistics Authority data, which is the official repository of SDG indicators in the Philippines. So let's look at what are these targets and where are we now, essentially. Target 3.1, by reducing maternal mortality. So this is the baseline in 2017. This is the latest figure that we have, and this is by 2030, the target. So from 2017, from 84.4 proportion of birth attendance by skilled health personnel, the target is to make it 100. Under 3.2, 2017, the baseline, and this is our target. 3.3, this is the baseline. The latest, we have 2021, we have 2016, 2019, under malaria, to make it 0, the target. Malaria, maybe, yes, we can actually meet that target. But for some like TB, like HIV, the target is to make it 0. But as of 2021, we still have these figures. So these are some of the indicators or the targets that we might not be able to really achieve by 2030. I will not discuss this one by one. no? But I can provide you the link, no, to the documents so that you can actually look at it and review. So I will now move on to the second part of the lecture, which is the importance why we need to engage the higher education institutions in the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. So by the way, this, as you can see, I put some logos here, logos of universities. These are actually the higher education institutions that are actually part of that rank, no, made by the Webometrics ranking of world universities that actually seeks to promote open access to the knowledge generated by universities. So we have UP system, Ateneo, LaSalle, Mapua, University of San Carlos. No, of course there are a lot more higher education institutions, but I just put them because these are the universities that actually able, no, to get into that ranking by the world universities. So engaging the higher education institutions are actually very critical. No? We need to engage them to actually promote or attain the Sustainable Development Goals because higher education institutions are uniquely placed to actually lead a cross-sectoral implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Universities can actually provide invaluable support as a source of expertise in terms of research, in terms of instruction or education on all sectors, no, of the SDGs. The 17 SDGs, these are intersectoral in terms of achieving these goals. So the role or the function of the higher education institution is actually very important or critical in that aspect. Higher education institutions, as we all know, actually they mold the next generation of leaders as well as implementers. Higher education institutions must be engaged because of their critical function in terms of disseminating the knowledge, that's instruction or education, in terms of generating more knowledge, coming up with research outputs. And the other one is knowledge application, no? Coming up with those innovations that can be used in delivering public service to the Filipino community. The involving higher education institutions, no, we also need to recognize that it's actually only one way to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the key to SDG agenda? The key to the SDG agenda is actually collaboration. Collaboration and partnership. Like I think that's what PAASI is doing also. Collaborating with agencies, collaborating with government, collaborating with community, whether that's public or private organizations. The other one, higher education institutions, of course, not the only way to attain SDGs. We also need to institutionalize the commitment to attain the SDGs through research, through good governance, as well as partnership. So what's the role of the higher education institutions? Well, the role of the higher education institutions, we can actually integrate the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and all the targets, all the components of these SDGs into their curricula, no? So that when honing the next leaders, they will be more familiar about these sustainable development goals. The other one, university policies that higher education institutions, whether that policy is academic or non-academic, should actually be contributed or strategically contributed to the achievement of the SDGs. So with the SDG on mind, coming up with policies, academic or non-academic, the concepts, the principles of SDGs should actually be incorporated into these policies. I mentioned a while ago about partnership. Partnerships must go beyond universities. It's not only partnering with other universities in the country. Partnerships, when I mean partnership, this should also include not only national cooperation, but also global or international cooperation. So this should be part of the internationalization effort of all higher education institutions. The other role of the higher education institution is to actually lead a role in fostering country's scientific policy interface, involving national policies and discussions, being critical with the policies that the government is actually coming up, giving comments or critiques on issues. These are some of the areas wherein higher education institutions can actually foster or promote the attainment of the SDGs. Additional role of the higher education institutions, engaging in collaborative undertaking, well, making sure that the leadership, the top management actually support, or the environmental support, the management support should be provided with this collaborative undertaking of various organizations, whether private or public. And the last one is, of course, developing a culture that actually integrates the awareness of the sustainable development goals in these activities towards the achievement of these global goals. So these are some of the areas or the roles wherein higher education institutions, I think, can actually support or facilitate the achievement of the health, well-being, good health and well-being, which is SDG number 3. Let me share with you a bit one of the research project that I am involved in. So this one is actually what we call the Healthy Schools Environment, Supporting Healthy and Informed Choices of Food Beverage, Healthy Food Choice Support Mapping Walk. Or the title is a bit long, but the short version of it is the Healthy Food Choice Mapping Walk. This research project is actually in collaboration with the Science Institute of Science Tokyo. So the project is actually a 3-year project until 2027. And it's funded by the Japan Agency of Medical Research and Development, or AMED, together with the Global Alliance for Chronic Diseases. So what's the project all about? Well, I'll just, there's a lot of objective, but maybe I would like to highlight one of the objective of the research, which is actually to assess food education environment and the surrounding environment of junior high school students in urban areas in the Philippines. In this case, for our implementation, we have the Navotas City in Metro Manila. And we would want to look at what are really the non-medical factors that actually affects, no, or influences the health outcomes. No, health outcomes, it could be the good health and well-being of the community. So this one, school food environment in the Philippines, of course, looking at the statistics coming from UNICEF in 2023, that 3/4 or 74% of our youngsters 13 to 15 years old actually eat less, no, than 3 portions of the vegetables per day, which is very alarming. And more than 1/3 or 38% drink at least one carbonated drink per day. So we're actually, aside from looking at these figures, we actually do a mapping walk wherein we identify what are the fast food chains, what are the type of stores, what are the type of food, how healthy are the food being sold, no, in these stores that are located in the vicinity of the schools. So the type of food availability in and outside or around the schools are frequently limited to unhealthy types of food such as fast food, deep fried snacks, the carbonated drink, soft drinks, and processed products. These are actually present, no, in the locality or in the surrounding of the schools. So what do you expect, right? So children actually spend considerable part of their day at schools during the week. Hence, the school food environment actually plays a big role in their early dietary habits, and it actually affects their health outcomes. Their good health, their well-being are actually affected on this one. So I've mentioned to you about the SDH, or the sustainable or the socio-economic determinants of health. So what are economic determinants of health? So SDH is actually a non-medical factors that influence health outcomes. So the conditions, it actually refers to the conditions in which people are born, grow, the the place where they work, where they live, and the age, no? That's actually the socioeconomic determinants of health. So anything that goes beyond the medical factors like genetics, infective agents, are what we call the socioeconomic determinants of health. So it includes economic policies and systems, development agendas, social norms, social policies, and political systems. Why is it very important to actually highlight or to discuss when we talk about good health and well-being? Because when we look at the determinants, no, or the factors or the determinants that influences our health, no, we can see here that the healthcare is not at all, it's not at all a major determinant, no, the healthcare, this one. Why? Because it only actually makes up to 20%, no, 20% of what makes us healthy are actually healthcare, access to care and quality of care. Only 20% includes those moments of an individual, of a person in a healthcare environment. What's more important actually to our health is the combined influence of our physical environment, of our socio-economic factors, and our behaviors, health behaviors, no? In fact, 50%, no, that socio-economic factors as well as the physical environment, 50% of influences that influences our health can actually be traced back to our zip code. No? The education, the job status, where is our job located, the income of the family, how safe is the community, the support of the family, of the community, physical environment, So that's constitute actually 50%. So it's more than the healthcare, no? It's only 20%, no? So not at all a major determinant. So encouraging people to actually practice health behaviors, the tobacco use, diet, exercise, alcohol use, sexual activity, no? Regardless of their socioeconomic status, is the goal actually of public health interventions like health promotion, which work to create a healthy physical and social environment. So the second part, no, the towards the end of this lecture, I would like to share with you a case study. This is a third-class municipality, the Noveleta, municipality of Noveleta, and we can see that despite the challenges, the limitations that the community, that the municipality encountered, they were able to actually transform their municipality, and they were able to see the changes in terms of health service delivery, health outcomes, good health and well-being of the community actually transform. I'll show to you. So just a quick fact of the municipality of Noveleta. So this is a third-class municipality and part of the first district of the Cavite. Noveleta, municipality of Noveleta is actually composed of 16 barangays. The land area, it's 16.43 kilometers. The population as of 2020, well, it's not that big, close to 50,000. And the major income sources of its residents is actually fishing and services. If you know, Noveleta is actually the smallest municipality in the province of Cavite. So I don't know who's coming, who are from our attendees who are from the municipality or from the province of Cavite.
Hi.
Yeah, I would like to inform you also, no, that part of the initiative of the College of Public Health, the University of the Philippines, is actually conducting a capacity building for our local chief executives, mayors, governors, no, by inviting them to attend the municipal leadership development program, or if that's for municipality, or the provincial leadership development program. So the chief executive of the municipality of Cavite, together with the health teams, the municipal health office, as well as the budget office and the key officials of the municipality, were actually invited, and they have undergone into this what we call the leadership development. So the leadership development program, capacity building program, is actually a collaboration between the Department of Health, the Zwillig Family Foundation, in this case, the UP Manila College of Public Health as the academic partner, as well as the LGU, the Noveleta Municipality. So here they have to undergo into 18 months, no, 3-module program, the mayors and the MHO. So it's a 6-month, it includes 6-month practicum. There will be a coaching and mentoring after each of the module. So finish the module in 1 week, then the mayor and the health team will go back to the municipality, implement the learnings. There will be coaching and mentoring sessions, no, during that period. Then after the 6 months practicum, they come back again to attend the second module, finish the second module, go back to the municipality, implement the learnings, coaching, mentoring sessions, then get the third module towards the colloquium. So that's the process of the leadership development program that the municipality, the officials of the municipality of Noveleta underwent during this process. So there are bridging leadership inputs. There are leadership acts that has to be presented. There are technical inputs that are being provided to them. So these are the component of the 3 module, and we look at the changes, how their health system actually changed. So we get their baseline, and after undergoing to this program, we look at their health system. Is there an improvement in their in the 6 building blocks? I'll show to you how we are doing it. So this is actually the 6 building blocks of a health system by the WHO. The leadership and governance. We have this. Just move this one. Anyway, I cannot remove it. So the leadership and governance, the health financing, the second building block. The third building block is the health service delivery, health human resources, access to medicine and technology, and health information system. In each of the building block, there are also targets, like they need to expand the functional, and make the local health board functional, etc. As you can see here, these are color-coded. Color-coded because we need to identify what areas are they somehow good, what areas needs to have more focus and make some adjustments. Color-coded, meaning green could be the what? Green is a good one. Yellow somehow at the middle, and the red one, the red color red. These are the areas wherein they actually fail, or there are no systems in place in these targets. So I'll show you in a while how this roadmap of the Noveleta, municipality of Noveleta, transformed to somehow a better color-coded roadmap after undergoing to that program. Additional health situation in Noveleta. They only have 1 medical doctors. They have a low budget allocation of 7%. They have no government birthing facility, no PhilHealth accredited facility. They have a poor environmental sanitation. They have no functional referral network. They have a high infant deaths, high malnutrition rates, and household with unsanitary toilets. So these are the baseline in 2016 before undergoing to that leadership and development program. And to get to our preferred reality, we need to have a different kind of leadership. And the kind of leadership that the program actually promotes is what we call the bridging leadership. So the preferred reality, good health outcomes, good health and well-being, that's our preferred reality, right? And getting to that preferred reality is actually a process. It's actually a process. It starts with ownership. There should be a personal awareness of the leader about the problem. There should be a situational analysis. What's the situation? They should be aware of their systems, and they should have a personal response or personal vision and mission of the local chief executive. That's part of the ownership. Then the other process is the co-ownership. So there should be a trust building mechanisms. The leader, the local chief executive needs to understand who are the other stakeholders, because I cannot do it alone. So who he or she needs to identify and come up with relationships, connections, to come up with shared values and visions, no, for the municipality, and hopefully together they will be able to come up with collaborative response. And the third process will be the co-creation. So after undergoing to that ownership, co-ownership, hopefully to this co-creation phase, the citizens will be now empowered. No? There will be more institutional arrangement that are sustainable. The programs and services will be now more responsive, and hopefully resulting to that preferred reality, good health and well-being, and addressing the issue of equity or inequity. So that's the kind of leadership that we're trying to build using through the program. So these are some of the problems that have been identified by the LGU. They have a difficulty in access to higher level of cares, and they want to establish an LGU-owned public hospitals and make health services available at all times. So establishing partnership with local private lying-ins, establishing referral systems or networks to higher level of facilities, and making patients transport services at all times. So these are just some of the goals of the municipalities when they underwent to this municipal leadership development program. They also look at the issues, no, their problems in sanitary toilets, malnutrition, poor environment sanitation, no? And of course, a critical component of that one is how the political, the leadership act, of the local chief executive, and that the community is willing, they are willing and they are prepared to act upon the ideas, no, once they have acknowledged that the the objectives, the targets are part of their they own that objectives and targets. So these are some of the interventions, strategies and interventions that they have underwent. So there is a deep dive. The local chief executive as well as the health team need to dive in, look at the condition of the municipality. If they have GIDA areas, they need to visit that one, identify what are the problems. So the input for this one, of course, is the health policies. They have to look at the budget of the barangay, increase budget allocation at the municipal level, pooling of resources coming from external donors as well as monetary support or capacity building. So some of the output of conducting this one would be the partnership with the barangays. They have a massive campaign on health through the health summits and forums during town fiestas. Community participation, they involve other sectors, not just the other stakeholders, no? From the other sectors. They also look at or establish the Rotary Club on sanitation, even church, no? They also identified the church as one of the stakeholders. So this is the condition of the Noveleta before they undergo to that program, before the rehabilitation. The condition of Noveleta Long Beach before the rehabilitation. So Noveleta Beach is actually when they try to test the coliform in years 2016 to 2017. Did you know that there are 1,329 parts of fecal coliforms, or 100 milligrams per liter, 100 milligrams of coliform per liter in this beach. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lido Beach. Lido Beach in Noveleta. So it has a 1,329 parts of fecal coliform, or 880 parts of fecal coliform in the Villamar Beach. So there are two beaches, no? The Lido Beach, it has 1,330 coliforms. The Villamar Beach, it has 880 coliform during the rehabilitation. But now, after undergoing and making some strategies, implementing some strategies, they were actually able to develop and transform that Lido Beach and the Villamar Beach. So this is now the result of the year-long rehabilitation program as part of the project of the municipality when they underwent to this MLDP program. They conduct a massive cleanup drive in the area. So after this one, the water testing company assessed the local beach, the Villamar, which previously has 880 fecal coliform. It's now down to 27 parts of coliform during this time, 2018, while the Long Beach, which has 1,329 coliform before the massive rehabilitation, it's now down to 25 parts of coliform, passing the normal 100 milligrams per liter of coliform. So beachgoers actually feel now safe and they enjoy the beauty of Noveleta Beach. And this is actually one of the flagship projects of the mayor, of the local chief executive during this time. The mayor during this time is Mayor Chua. So Mayor Chua actually encourages the public to cooperate, to upgrade the quality of the local beach and continuously clean up the beach. What are the other output or outcome of that massive rehabilitation as one of the flagship project of the municipality? Did you know that the sea turtles, endangered sea turtles at Long Beach Resort Noveleta actually now came back, So ganun pala yun, if the beach is clean, the sea turtle, the endangered sea turtle will now come back. So it's a proof that that beach is actually totally clean, And this is now the view of the Noveleta Long Beach. Noveleta Long Beach is actually coined as the Boracay of the North, the Boracay, the other Boracay. All right. So as a result of addressing the the socioeconomic determinants of health, or SDH, the municipality's fishing livelihood of the community actually also flourish, with that innovations, with that rehabilitations that has been implemented by the municipality, the fishing livelihood actually flourish in this municipality. The other interventions that actually addresses the socioeconomic determinants of health, they actually the local chief executive and the officials of the municipality actually train the bystanders, yung mga tambay, yung out of school youth. They now give them opportunity to be trained as call center agents. So they conducted a 5-day training for free. They provide support to trainees and from which is extended up to the job hunting and transportation. So they were able to address not just the health condition, no, the livelihood, the SDH component of what makes what affects the health condition of an individual. Aside from so with those innovations, with those outcomes, no, the municipality actually received, no, received some awards, some recognitions, no, the importance of collaboration, the importance of working with other sectors, not just on health, but also on health, on infrastructure, on education, on livelihood. So these are some of the awards, no, that the municipality were able to receive. No? And from this roadmap, in 2017, it has 25 reds and only 6 greens after undergoing to that leadership development program as part of the capacity building for the local chief executive and the municipality. It's now in 2019. This is now the view. No, only 1 red and all most of them are green. Now you can see the difference. It's really a big improvement. The remaining red, this one, the remaining red would be the RHU's health human resource adequacy. They still lack the required number of human resources in their rural health unit. No? So the health service delivery, you can see here, health service delivery, disease prevention control have all long been green. Information system, access to medicine, leadership and governance, health financing, close to green, all. But for the health human resources, the municipality still lacks some, still have some gaps on that one. For the health indicators, the one that I've mentioned to you, these are now the changes. Health budget increases from 7%, it's now up to 22%. They now have a PhilHealth accreditation for Consulta. They have Animal Bites Treatment Center. They have MCP packages. 0 maternal deaths. Do you believe that? 0 maternal deaths for 5 years. Infant deaths decreased from 8 to 2 cases. They were able to pass the case detection rate and treatment success rate, 100% access to safe water, 98% rate access to sanitary toilet, 98% facility-based delivery. They have increased health human resources, but still they lack some component of that one. Awards also received from the Department of Health. No? This one, we also the municipality also received the award from the DOH Calabarzon, the regional center of the Department of Health. Actually give them the first Golden Job Award. Golden Job Award meaning the municipality has a job well done after their successful Bayanihan Bakunahan during this time. So I think that's I would like to end the case there. So the municipality actually received a lot of award because of the innovations, because of the strategies that they have implemented to address the socioeconomic determinants of health, and they were able to somehow achieve the SDG number 3, good health, improvement of health outcomes, good health and well-being of their community. Lastly, before my time's up, I would like to leave you with some of the take-home messages. So despite despite the efforts from both the public and private sectors to meet the set SDG targets by 2030. As you can see, I presented to you a while ago about that SDG Watch document. And there are still unmet needs that are still exist in the healthcare access and affordability across the country. So the higher education institutions, the academe, is actually uniquely placed to lead the cross-sectoral implementation of SDGs, providing invaluable source of expertise in research, in education, and public service and innovation on all sectors of the SDGs. In addition to being widely considered as neutral, the higher education institution as a neutral and influential players. So the third one, of course, when we want to design public health interventions up to the community level, we need to also consider, always put in mind the socioeconomic determinants of health, because as I mentioned, 50% or more than 50% of what makes a person healthy can be actually traced to their local zip code. Good governance and political will of the local chief executives actually play a major role in supporting and accelerating the initiatives to address various challenges by actually working together, identifying who are the stakeholders, who are the players that we can actually partner with or collaborate with to address the challenges and the limitations that they face, as I've shown to you in the case study of Noveleta. So the kind of leadership known is actually what we call the bridging leadership, which is actually suitable for encouraging multi-stakeholder initiatives to alleviate societal injustices. And of course, I mentioned to you about the process of the bridging leadership, ownership, co-ownership, and co-creation. I think, and the last one, of course, it's about leading collaborative action. So the municipality cannot do it alone on their own with that huge challenge that they actually face during that time. But with collaborative actions, DOH, Zwilling Family Foundation as a development partner, the academe, the College of Public Health also comes in to pitch in whatever the resources that we have. It's really a collaboration, including the identifying the stakeholders, the church, the non-government organizations and societal organizations that actually work together to effect social change and promote good health and well-being. I think that's the end of my presentation. And yeah, thank you, everyone. And I would love to listen to your comments and answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Before we go to the, oh, there's a clapping hand already from Dr. Pam Santos. Before we go to the question and answer period, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Vice President of PAASE, Dr. Marge Peña, very inspiring leader also. And I also would like to acknowledge the presence of another dean right across that pathway there every time I enter the College of Medicine, the presence of Dean Charlotte Xiong of the College of Medicine. I was reading the background of the College of Medicine, apparently of the College of Public Health. Apparently in 1928, Dr. Hilario Lara because Dr. Lara, the College of Public Health is named after, it's Lara Hall.
Yeah.
And the College of Medicine is Doc Calderon Hall. So Dr. Hilara was a district health officer of La Union, and he
Yes,
was
sir.
sent as a pensionado to an institution close to where I live now, which is the Johns Hopkins
Yes.
School of Public Health. And lo and behold, they established the College of Medicine. So, well, let's open the door for questions and answers. This is a very informal platform. No, we're not into our tuxedos here today, and we're here to ask questions and learn more. So, if anyone has a question, we would like to entertain them at this point.
Thank you, Sir Billy. And
Yeah.
I'm short of breath because of that cough and colds over the past few days.
All right. Well, let me see. As others are thinking about their questions, uh, universal healthcare. Universal healthcare. I think just passed the Congress 2, 3 years ago, if my facts are right. What impact has it made in the public uh, in the public healthcare system of the Philippines? Before I take notice about this transformation of Nobaleta,
Yes, sir.
but there's an island, Siranglao Island. I think it's the surfing capital of the Philippines. So they show like it was Bali of 1952, right at the moment. But on the back of that, the same as Boracay, there is filth in the back there. I think they have fixed it. So, what is your perception? What is your perspective, sir, with regards to how is the Universal Healthcare Act has it made a dent on on the entire Philippines as to its public health care system?
Yes. Well, the Universal Healthcare Act, when it was signed into law, actually changed. Uh, well, it's not abruptly because we have to wait for the IRR, which they actually come up, and part of that implementation would be changing the landscape of how the health service delivery will be financed. So there is now this, what they call the special health fund, that will now be downloaded upfront. That's the plan. We have identified provinces, no, as an implementation site of the universal healthcare. And the plan is it will be downloaded upfront, that special fund. Hopefully, it will be used, no, to improve the health service delivery, the financing of the health service delivery in one province. So there will be a network now of healthcare facilities in terms of delivering services. So the role now of the province, the governor, as well as the the entire sangguniang panglungsod, no, will now act as the as the one who will give the funds, no, to these individual healthcare units. So in terms of financing, it will actually change a lot.
All right. You mentioned that higher. I'm glad that Marge has shown up because she always has some penetrating questions. Also, I'm going to call on her next, and all of that. You mentioned about the role of higher educational institutions. Okay, Dr. Saravat. So the University of the Philippines system has the College of Public Health. And I believe Ateneo presents itself as the Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health. Are there other universities that are particularly addressing public health? You know, the dean is present here, and I know from my interaction that there are about 62, I think, and more medical schools, including one in UP Mindanao as a College of Medicine. So what are the other universities, let's say universities, doing in participating in public health?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not just the Ateneo or the College of Public Health. We have a number. Actually, another one will be coming this January 30, this month end. The University of Northern Philippines, they are actually planning to put up a School of Public Health also in their university. And they actually wrote a letter to Chancellor Michael T. They plan to do a benchmarking activity with the college this coming month end. Previously, last year, we also received delegates who do benchmarking. Bataan Peninsula State University is also putting up another School of Public Health. And that's good. That's fine. That's fine because the College of Public Health, we're trying to, we're actually, we need to collaborate together to promote preventive public health concepts, public health ideas. In fact, the former Chancellor, Chancellor Carmencita Padilla, we did a workshop, all the colleges that includes Dean Chong. We attended 3 workshops. 3 workshops because with the universal healthcare, there is now a highlight, more emphasis on the role of the public health, of health promotion. And part of that, the idea, the objective of those workshops is actually how are we going to integrate public health concepts, public health methods in the programs being offered by the other colleges of the University of the Philippines, Manila. So we come up and it's not yet out, but we are now developing the toolkit for that one on how to really integrate public health concepts into the curriculum of various program offerings of the University of the Philippines, Manila. So we welcome those things. There are a lot of schools, universities that are really pushing now, no, to offer also public health programs. And that's fine. That's very much welcome.
You know, as a clinician, we treat one patient at a time. But if you have a public health system, a whole population benefits. Sir Al, Sir Al, you have the floor, sir.
Dr. Billy. For
Question natin.
yes, the question for you, Dean Garcia, is of
Yes,
course
sir.
I'm with UP for the last 10 years now. We had a very interesting session last week on the PAASE fireside chat involving a Yale assistant professor from Switzerland, based in Switzerland, using AI for capacitating our healthcare workers. One example that she showed was an actual, almost our equivalent barangay health worker in Africa consulting a former patient, stroke patient that's taking the wrong medication. And by using AI that they implemented, that they're recommending for us to look at, Meditron, I think is the name of the AI, is being able to take a picture of the medicine and instantly say, hey, that's wrong. And being able to incorporate such training in our implementation of public health policies. I love the description of the Veleta. I want to replicate it. We are part of a grant from Australia for health workforce development together with Unilab Foundation. I chair one. I'm a president for one of their foundations for STEM education. And again, I look at it from the perspective of education in this particular case on how to incorporate these tools like artificial intelligence, edge computing, specifically for capacitating healthcare workers on the front lines without that much need for ChatGPT and all the large language model, but really on the edge, just the right information at the right location. Because as dean or your school is actually probably the most correct department or college to curate and input the edge data that is required for capacitating our frontliners, meaning our barangay healthcare workers, in terms of implementing and educating our population for the best healthcare policies and what government support is available. So my question is, I know Chancellor Michael T. is very in tune and has actually have a project with PCHRD for AI utilization. In your department or in your college now, I'm going to put you in the spot. How do you see the use of this type of artificial intelligence edge computing? We can support you from Diliman, Camila Pros. But definitely, first, I want your vision and the utilization of AI to do or accelerate or multiply what you did in Noveleta, Cavite.
Ang hirap naman ng tanong mo, Sir Al.
Okay na yan.
Para akong ini-interview ngayon na tatakbo na second term.
Pag second term na yan. Malaking points yan kay Chancellor Michael kung masagot mo ng tama.
Sakto, mga paghahandaan ko itong AI na to. Honestly, sir, sa ngayon we are not into that AI yet. But during I'm glad to inform you that we did a benchmarking activity within US last week. That's why I was not able to attend this webinar. I actually registered in this AI webinar of PAASE last I think that's 2 weeks ago or last week.
Last week.
I was not able to attend because we were in NUS Singapore doing a benchmarking. And one of the questions that we asked them is about AI, how they integrate AI and their curriculum, in their research, etc. And they actually invite us to work with them, to sit with them, and collaborate on working with artificial intelligence. But aside from that one, yes, we're interested to collaborate with NUS and maybe apply it here in the College of Public Health, integrating AI. The things that I'm actually looking at, because it's inevitable. We need to use on our advantage the artificial intelligence. And what I'm looking at is that if there is a precision medicine, then what are the other possibilities that we can actually work when it comes to precision public health interventions? So what are the public health interventions now that we can actually incorporate the artificial intelligence? And yes, sir, ito yung mga areas, these are the areas that we need to, that I feel the college needs to step up, no, to integrate AI in our public health offerings. But thank you, sir. We're not doing much on this one, but we're into it now, together with especially with the NUS benchmarking that we did last time. And yes, we will be asking your office, no, to for some help, to brainstorm some ideas on how this one.
Sige, game tayo dyan. Saka not only UP system, Dean Fernando, but also, pangalan nito, pati ang NAST, kasama ko si National Scientist Benchit. We did a technical working group on omics technology implementation in the Philippines. I think AI, we did some in the engineering division, but I think AI and health has begun. There was some description in the UP AI conference that Dr. Giselle, former president of PAASE, organized in July. But I think we need to advance our actual plans and implementing activities moving forward kasi medyo magaan. Nakita ko nung July, nothing against UP Manila, but it's really, I'm glad that you did get exposed to the National University of Singapore, part of the ASEAN Diagnostic Development for the last 5 years with them. But I'm really concerned about our plans for AI in health in the last 2 years, and we only have another 3 years, I think, in the current administration. So we might have of Gigil and BBM. So I think we need to kind of increase our capability. So, kasi tinatanong din ako ni Secretary Fred Paep, President Pascual ng UP, ano ba ang AI play natin sa health? And clearly, these are, omics is one, but definitely our AI and public health and barangay health worker capacitation, like what was presented last week. I encourage you to look at the session last week. And kasi darating, dadalhin yata ni Dr. Billy si Dr. Ann, February 4th. So I think you should initiate that discussion on its utilization for public health. And I think if Bin Chong here is also part of the National Academy, Bin Chong, Charlotte, definitely let's put this on the agenda on the next time we have a technical working group listing for the National Academy, AI and health for public consumption. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Actually, we're actually planning to also incorporate it sa mga sa mga courses. Pero honestly, bago lang kasi ito. Well, matagal na siya, pero it's just being realized that the importance of it being incorporated in our coursework. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Before I
Pwede ako
call
tumulong
on,
dyan kasi we're developing the industrial curriculum for our health, not only healthcare workers, but semiconductor workers for Industry 4.0 competencies. We can align that based on ano ba yung gusto nating AI capable ng barangay healthcare workers, ano yung activity nila, ano yung competency, ano yung courses.
Yeah.
Kakatugtong lahat.
Yes, sir. Even in our short course offerings, training courses, I think there is a need now to somehow incorporate.
Yes. Kaya, marami trabaho na yung gagawin natin. Pumanda ka.
Dr. Cabellion?
Before I call on the Dean of the College of Medicine, I'd like to see what our Vice President, Dr. Peña, is thinking. And the other one that I'm very interested in making a comment is from Dr. Ray Pagtakhan, who had a big view of public health in what is it? Is it, I think Canada is a, Canada, sir? Nakalimutan ko na kung Commonwealth. A Commonwealth soon to be part of the United States.
It won't happen.
But first of all, Vice President Dr. Peña, ma'am,
Actually, I just have
comments here or observations?
Well, I have two things. Now, the comment is that I'm really glad to hear about Dean talking about the social determinants of health, because even here in the United States, in our college, we really initiated a cluster hire last year to address the social determinants of health, because oftentimes that is overlooked. We're only looking, with all the omics that's happening, we're very much focused on the genetic determinants of health, and we forget that really we can make a lot of impact when we consider the social determinants of health. So I can tell you that last year I was part of a big committee where our college hired 4 faculty simultaneously at all levels just to address social determinants of health. So I'm really glad that you brought that up in your talk. The other thing too is that, Billy, like you said, Dr. Ann is gonna be there in the Philippines this February, right? So are they gonna
Yes,
be
ma'am.
talking with Dean over here to
Yes.
coordinate this massive AI project that they have that is
Yes.
going worldwide? Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's
Yes. Before I mention more about Dr. Hartley's visit, and some also comments from Dr. Xiong,
Mhm.
Dr. Pagtaghan, sir,
Yes,
Oh, one
I
more question.
Doctor, I
Uh,
tell you, we're looking
Billy,
at
one
a
more. I have to ask the question from our president because she
yeah.
had to leave. But anyway, this is from our president. She asked me to ask the
Oh,
question for you. First of all,
oh,
congratulations on the outstanding project that you and your team delivered in Noveleta. Which other areas in the Philippines are you planning to expand this project to? Or is that the only thing that's going on now? Or there simultaneous projects going on now? Because it's really a very good success story.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Marge. Actually, the College of Public Health is the academic partner in
Mhm.
conducting capacity building for local chief executives, mayors like Noveleta Municipality. Right now, we are into Aklan Province,
Mhm.
Aklan, Dinagat Island, Ifugao, northern part for the governors. Region 10, we're also into that one. And part of the donation that we received from the Zwilig family, because I'm sure you're aware of that donation. There is a program donation on program for health equity and program for health leadership and governance. We are planning to replicate the municipal development program and conduct it in farm areas. I think
Mhm.
farm needs our help,
Mhm.
considering the situation. Oh, yes, we understand the situation there, but we need to put also some of our resources, some of our bring this program into this
Yeah.
area so that they can also uh, improve their health outcomes. So those are the areas, ma'am. The
Mhm.
other areas, they actually have an academic partner. So it's not just the College of Public Health who is
Yeah.
working with LGUs. There are corresponding academic partners of the other areas. So I think those are the
Yeah,
areas we're doing now, Dr. Marge. Thank you po.
that's really good to hear. Yeah. I guess the question is, how do you pick which part of the country to go? Is it just because there's a need, or do they come to you, or do you see that you can make progress there?
Yeah. We actually the for example, CHD Region 1. So together with them, the regional office of DOH, together with them, we sit in, they
Mhm.
discuss who are the municipalities that we think are yung
Mhm.
kasalaylayan na nasa
Mhm.
almost there, but they needs such kind of program so that they can actually bear the fruit of what they're doing. So there is a criteria, there is a matrix that we
Yeah.
use. So we
Mhm.
identify, we prioritize also. Because of that limitation of
Yeah.
resources, we cannot implement the program in every municipalities or or LGUs.
Yeah, that's really good because you can optimize and know that you will get good results. The effort that's put in is good results. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is very interesting talk. Yes.
Dr. Pagtaghan, sir, your view from Canada.
yes, thank you, Dr. Silverio, and thank you again for your presentation. Very informative and instructive. A few comments and perhaps a couple of questions. I noted that that the universal healthcare constitutes about only 20% to determine the success of the health and well-being of a population, which means it underscores to me, I get the take-home message that the role of public health is even more important than the so-called curative phase of medicine. And so to the earlier comment made by someone about the unity between public health and medicine in the College of Medicine, I think there is a message there that I can see that there ought to be a better cooperation and, in fact, coordination to harness the benefits of both. That public health is, even in Canada, the focus on prevention, which of course is public health, certainly will help reduce the cost of illness in the future. So there is really a good role for public health. And perhaps it is a challenge to the colleges of medicine that most colleges of medicine may well take the step now to make it very obvious that the College of Medicine is also about the public health. And so the public health institutions must fully be integrated if we are to really have a cohesive approach to the health and well-being of a population. So that's my observation. The second point is when you say that in the universal healthcare, it is now going good in the communities and barangays, etc. My one question that you may take note of is the funding going to or under the control of local politicians, or is it completely independent of the local politicians, and therefore it is not used as a political tool, but completely at the discretion of the public health official, knowing that the integrity of the system has really been safeguarded. The other thing I like to observe is that this year, or the immediately past year, Canada and the Philippines just celebrated the 75th year of foreign relations, diplomatic relations. And both the Embassy of the Philippines in Canada and the Embassy of Canada in the Philippines have been involved in a project featuring the so-called Filipino Canadians who have made it in Canada. But the message I like to share is using that, perhaps engaging both institutions can be utilized to help advance the healthcare, the higher education engagement. So my question then is, what do you see is the one major obstacle to global higher education engagement? I mentioned that because speaking only of Canada, we now have a Canadian Filipino senator, Senator Osler, who happens to be a specialist in otolaryngology and could have an influence and access to how to facilitate the engagement of a higher institution in Canada. Now, in Canada, the delivery of healthcare is provincial, but there is the universal healthcare Medicare, wherein by funding, the federal government participates in that process of healthcare delivery, but the ultimate jurisdiction belongs to the provinces. Now, the province of Manitoba, where I come from now, is run by the NDP government, which is definitely committed to universal healthcare. Okay. Now, I mentioned that in trying to help engage globally, one may consider making those contacts. I'm now retired, well, long retired. I just celebrated my 90th birthday, and but it can be pursued diplomatically, through the foreign relations, the Canadian Embassy in Manila and the Embassy of the Philippines in Canada, how we can utilize those two institutions in advancing the higher education engagement that you spoke about in terms of involving, say, one province of Canada, if not the federal department. So here you have an occasion for the federal. There is Senator Osler, a Canadian Filipino, and then, of course, locally, the Minister of Immigration and Labor is a Canadian Filipino. So there are opportunities there that I would like to share. Thank you. Thank you again for your presentation.
Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pagtakhan, for your insights, for your comments, and for your question. The first one, as I've mentioned a while ago, there was this workshop that we conducted during the time of former Chancellor Padilla. And the College of Medicine, Dr. Chong, also attended that workshop. And we identified some of the courses or areas component of the curriculum of the medical degree, wherein we can actually apply and implement or incorporate the concepts of public health. Aside from that, we are also glad to inform you that together with the College of Medicine, we are actually implementing now the double degree program, the MD MPH program. So it's a medical degree, master of public health degree program. It actually now highlights the recognition that our medical doctor students need to also understand, no, the concepts, the processes, no, the importance of public health in their profession. So it's it's a dual degree program. It's actually, we're now in the third batch or second batch. If I'm not mistaken, it's about going to that third batch of students. First batch, we have 16 or 17 students who apply to this MD-MPH. Second batch, more or less around that figure also. The good thing with this one is that they can actually the students are actually taking the MPH courses, no, during Saturdays, no, during their vacant period, without additional years from their medical degree program. So hindi po siya plus 2 years or plus 3 years. So the courses now of the MPH, Master of Public Health, are now integrated. Although we need to improve how integration could be done. But yes, we're into it. We recognize the importance of working together. The medical degree needs to understand, medical degree students need to understand these concepts of prevention, of public health components, no, when they do their practice. So that's the first one. On your question on the possibility of the UHC funds, no, being downloaded to the local politicians like the governors at the provincial level. Yes, that's also one of my worries about being influenced, no, if you're not part of our if we're not part of our block, then yeah, I will give you a little bit of this one because you're not part of my party. So yes, but hopefully during the implementation, no, this will be before the implementation, the full implementation of the UHC, no, this will be ironed out later on. I don't know how, but yes, this is also one of my concern that the funding now will be being held by the governor, and if the local mayor is not part of that party, then there might be some issues on it. But yeah, these are the things that we need to address, no, given the complexity of the Philippine politics and Philippine health health system.
Actually, politicians would benefit from being independent if they will begin to realize it more and more by being known publicly as independent from the decision making on the distribution of funding for public health. Then they cannot be pressured even by their own people because they know and they can say, well, it is beyond my jurisdiction. So in a sense, it is a safeguard to to the politicians' integrity. So it should be, I can see it as being welcomed by most if presented that way. It is not that we doubt them. It is really to make a better system. Now, we have lived with the past for many centuries, for years. We can try at least a new one with a good prospect of a better success.
Yeah, agree, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Well, a person's engagement is multifaceted. You're not only be an expert on economics, but you also have to have the feel for the political scene to be able to thrive. So, Dean Charlotte Chong, are you still there, ma'am? Would like to hear what you all are thinking. Nako, napag-meeting na yata din natin. There it is. So artificial intelligence was just mentioned a few, and we had a session with Dr. Ann Hartley last week with regards to the deployment of a large multimodal model in trying to diagnose to see its accuracy in clinical diagnoses. We're also trying to define whether you don't need no longer a radiologist, but it's not that. We're trying to, there is no radiologist at the Ilocosur Provincial Hospital. So an x-ray is there, but it's unread for about 3-4 days. But if we can get it going and see if it's able to read an x-ray accurately with the supervision of a physician, that will be it. But as far as public health, that's a very interesting topic as to where artificial intelligence will come in. I'll have to kind of read a little bit more about that. But Dr. Ann Hartley will be visiting the Philippines personally. There is a WHO meeting in Thailand, and she has gladly acceded to our invitation to give a presentation personally at the Henry C. Building. And the dean just wrote me the other day that they're inviting the postgraduate Institute of Medicine, I believe, and trying to get the colleges, the computer science department. Of course, the College of Public Health is there. Of course, they're certainly particularly invited to go and see that session. LaSalle is nearby, and hopefully all the who's who in the Philippines can go there and have a conversation. Well, let's see. Oh, it's almost 2 hours in this session. It's always a very inspiring, and I learn a lot. But again, we have to kind of have to end all good things, and maybe next time. So, Madam Vice President,
Okay,
your
so
turn.
at this point, we want to present a certificate of appreciation to Dr. Fernando B. Garcia Jr. This is presented to you, sir, for being our speaker in the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, PASE, webinar entitled Good Health and Well-Being, Insights and Challenges in the Philippine Context, held on January 17, 2025. Presented this day, January 27, 2025, with our deepest gratitude. Signed by our President, Dr. Gladys Cherise Completo, President 2024-2025 of PAASE. So we're presenting this to you, and our Administrator Fred will email this to you, sir. Thank you very much for this very enlightening talk that you gave today. Eye-opening and very inspiring. Thank you.
Salamat po. Salamat, Sir Billy, at saka sa PAASE Board of Directors, officers, and members. Salamat po sa pag-imbita sa
we hope to see you again soon. Yes.
Thank you po.
And Billy, thank you for organizing this. Yeah.
Thank you,
So,
Madam President, and thank you, Dean Garcia.
So we would like to announce our next activity that is coming in February. And this is the Global Women's Breakfast 2025. The theme for this is Accelerating Equity in Science. And we have some very exciting guests for this. Fab, do we have? Okay, so this is going to be, we have very inspiring speakers, women speakers that are leaders and mentors and also inspirations to our women. First is Dr. Amy Lynn Barrion Dupo, President of the National Research Council of the Philippines, will be one of our guests. The second one is Dr. Rosenda Bronzy, Director of the Research and Development, Batangas State University, the National Engineering University of the Philippines. And finally, we've invited also Engineer Josephine Santiago Bond, who we actually had the honor of meeting in person and escorted us to NASA at the last PAASE meeting that was held in Florida a couple of years ago. So she's the Safety and Mission Assurance Manager and Commercial Crew of the Commercial Crew Program, SACCP Office Chief of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So these three women will give us talks about the experience and their journey through their professions. And so we hope to see that everyone can join this event. It should be very exciting for all. And so that will be held on February 11, 2025. You're all invited. Fab, do we have other announcements? And again, we want to remind everybody that APAMS 2025 is coming up in July 18, 19, with an excursion on July 20. It will be held right here at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, USA. So you're all invited to come. In the coming week, we'll be sending out a call for abstracts. And I would like to inform you that we have actually succeeded in inviting, for now, virtually, the Nobel laureate, Katrina Karoyki, the lady who developed the RNA vaccines for COVID. She will give a virtual talk for now, but we'll try to convince her to come in person. So please, that's exciting news for us. All right. Thank you very much again, everyone, for attending our webinar. And thank you, Billy, for organizing this. And so with that, we look forward to engaging with all of you again. And good night from the United States and good morning or good afternoon, I guess. Almost noon there in the Philippines. Thank you very much. Okay. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good morning. Magkaibang oras natin eh. Opposite ends tayo.
10:20.
Yeah, I come from Cavite.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. Thank
All
you.
right. Good night.
See you again.